time now for another episode of Mr. Nailsin's Wednesday Comics, and I only have one comic book to talk about. But don't worry, there's some comic book news that I'll discuss later on after I'm done here. But once again, revisiting the only comics that matter these days are in the independent world for the most part. And that's Mark Miller's Millerverse works, of course, and then Jeff Johns' Ghost Machine, and Redcoat being one of those titles. Now, the overall story that Redcoat was following has concluded, the one involving him teaming up with young Albert Einstein, and then, of course, the sad little coda on it where it jumps ahead in time at the end of Einstein's life, where Simon Pure shows up to say goodbye to him and all that. So it's one of those where you can jump around, jump around. And such is the case in this one, which is sort of this one shot horror story that takes place. And the conundrum here is how to review it without spoiling everything. I do want to showcase the art, which, of course, is, as always, absolutely incredible. It's very good. And basically, you've got this strange family out in the middle of nowhere that is not at all what they appear, and terrible things happens to one lonely traveler. And then the next lonely traveler is Redcoat himself, who falls victim to this horror scenario. Except, of course, he's immortal. So they picked the wrong guy to screw with. And, of course, he, does justice to these bastards, really, and all that. And then it ends on a tantalizing clue for future stories. In Geiger, it's starting to come together where you're seeing people from these other titles, albeit stretched out across time. But with Simon Pure, he's still around even into the future because, again, he's immortal, and that sort of thing. And so there's another little tease within this one as well for yet another player to come into this. And of course, in the back of all the Ghost Machine comics, you do get this timeline that gives you basically a map of what's played out here. So you see it starts here in 1776, Redcoat becomes immortal. A Northerner, that'll be a new title coming out of this, begins his hunt. Then it's like 1944, The Monster is made. I'm not entirely certain. Is this like a take on the Frankenstein monster? I don't know. It might be. Junkyard Joe, who's already showed up in Geiger. This talks about the first ghost is captured on film in the present day. So that would mean right now. Somebody got a paranormal photograph or video, what have you, of a ghost in the White House. And then 5 years into the future, the unknown war erupts, which creates the radioactive landscape, apocalyptic landscape of Geiger, and all of that. So you get this. These are certain points of where things play out. And of course, this point has already occurred, from the Redcoat titles. But I guess Redcoat for the time being, unless they go into other revelations later, is sort of the beginning point of this bizarre set of events that creates the Ghost Machine world. So there you go. So that's always there in the Ghost Machine titles. So far, I don't know if Rook is considered really a part of this. It's a Ghost Machine publication, but the map just only goes so far. It's 25 years later after the unknown war. And so that's where that is. So is there some distant future where the Earth becomes spacefaring and they have a colony of planets or whatnot, and then the Rook story takes place? I don't know. I don't know if they'll even get there, but Maybe not. And then it's kind of like, good Lord, is Simon Pure still around in the space age? It's traveling through space. But anyway, it's solid, it's great, and this is a sort of one-shot tale, a horror tale, really, and it's it was a fun, well done read, and so looking forward to where it goes now, which I'm sure it'll embark on another story arc going forward with all the strange mysticism and whatnot uh, within the lore of Redcoat. And I think it insinuated not only to, meet historical figures and whatnot and do this fictionalized version of them, but also some of the myths and characters like that in American history he will encounter. So all kinds of fun could be done with that as well. So there we go. Redcoat is the title I read for this episode of Mr. Nailsin's Wednesday Comics. And then in the meantime, well, there's been some news concerning DC and Marvel. And so, I'll relate that and tell you what I think of it. What's this? Marvel DC crossover confirmed. Good Lord. Spider Man's going to meet the new Superman and vice versa and all that? No. But one wonders, could they craft anything? I doubt it. Even though within the structure that the comics have always done it, theoretically. But then I don't know what it would be like. Justice League meets the Avengers, and then it's a Warner Brothers film, and then Avengers meet the Justice League, and then that's the Marvel, or that's how they would split that up. Yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that. But no, this is about the comic. So here, CBR has the article on this and it's been a long while since they've done this sort of thing. So the article goes, Marvel and DC have gone more than 2 decades without having an intercompany crossover, but that appears to be changing very soon, as reported by the Comics Beat's Heidi McDonald at Comic Pro, who reported that DC editor-in-chief Marie Javins and Marvel editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski have revealed that the two companies will be doing just two, intercompany crossovers later this year in the form of two one-shots, DC slash Marvel and Marvel slash DC, which I'm guessing the costs would be handled. So if DC's in front on this title, then they handle the printing and costs for that, and then Marvel handles it on this one. Although I seem to recall, I don't know if it was the amalgam books or the DC versus Marvel and vice versa thing, because that was like 4 issues, I believe, and DC was supposed to handle 2, and Marvel was supposed to do the other 2, and then Marvel just said, "Nah, you handle it." Something like that, and that really burnt some bridges there. So this will mark the first new crossover between the two companies since the JLA Avengers miniseries in 2003 to 2004 by Kurt Busiek and George Perez, which that was a lot of fun. It was long overdue. They were supposed to have done it in the 80s, but that fell apart. And then eventually they got around to it in the early 2000s. And George Perez was going to be the artist on the original. He had done some artwork on that, but it was screeched to a halt. And then he got to do it in that one. And actually hinted at ramifications coming from it with Krona being trapped in that egg and everything. But I don't know that any of that would be revisited. Every now and then, some of them do these teases. I think there was like a Thor comic where they hinted that part of the multiverse and looked like Metropolis with a streak of blue or red flying through the sky. So it's like, oh, that's Metropolis with Superman and everything, that kind of thing. But as far as a full-on crossover, they just haven't done it in a while. So anyway, which marked the end of a multi-decade history. Yeah, that was the last project, was the JLA Avengers. After that, of the crossovers that began in 1976 with Superman versus the Amazing Spider-Man. And that was in those tabloid size books. You could get those at the 7-Eleven back in those days. And this was the first one where it was Superman versus Spider-Man. And then there was Batman versus, no, not Daredevil, versus the Hulk. And it was the Hulk and the Shaper of Worlds and the Joker was in that with Batman. And had quite a few, and then off and on they would do it. But ultimately, it was going to culminate. Yeah, here they talk about it. After the great success of Superman versus Spider-Man, the two companies began doing regular crossovers in the early 80s. But after dispute over the original planned JLA Avengers in 1983, the two companies stopped working together for the rest of the 80s. In the 90s, however, the companies began to work together with a pair of Batman Punisher crossovers. These new crossover books got so common that Marvel and DC even had a full crossover event in 1996, with the superheroes from each company fighting the heroes of the other company in DC versus Marvel, and then even merged their companies together briefly for Amalgam Comics. So that's where they did this whole thing where they were all, yeah, swapped, so you had Spider Boy and an amalgam of Wolverine and Batman, and then Superman and Captain America, and it was Super Soldier, so on and so forth. And that was cool too. It was a fun little gimmicky thing, but it was fun. And interestingly enough, this was 1996, which was in the throes because they had this massive boom in the early 90s for comic books following the Batmania of the Batman movie. And they got drunk with it and overprinted a lot of stuff and burned through it all. And by 96, Marvel had to declare bankruptcy. So one wonders if this was sort of a desperate Hail Mary type thing in the hopes that would, reignite interest in the books and that sort of thing. And probably so. And now here they are, desperate for something again. So let's cross over. So it had been talked about for quite a while, but when Joe Quesada took over in the early 2000s, he wasn't for the idea. And then Dan DiDio over at DC wasn't either. The article gives their, reasons here. And a lot of it is this, oh, you do something special, but then how do you follow it? You can't do it forever, something like that. Well, it's just a special event. Everybody knows it. You do it for fun and then you move on. Yeah. So obviously DC has a new editor-in-chief now in Javins who worked for Marvel for years in the 1990s as an editor and colorist. And she and Cebulski had already allowed the release of a collection of the past DC Marvel crossovers for the first time in years. So the groundwork had already been laid for this new project. In addition, the two companies worked together in to release a special edition of JLA Avengers in honor of Perez, who wanted to see the book in print before he passed away from pancreatic cancer. So yeah, they did do that. So I guess even as of now, there should be some copies if you haven't read it. I do recommend it. It's a fun book. So this seemed like it was bound to happen eventually, and eventually is happening this year, just in time for both companies to also have major new film releases in July with Superman and Fantastic Four First Steps, which again is interesting because Superman is the dawn of superhero comics, really. But DC Comics, it all begins with Superman. And now they're rebooting their film franchise with a new Superman movie. And so, right at the same time, Marvel on decline with their movies really should look to Fantastic Four as a reboot and probably should have scrapped all their Secret Wars plans and stuff and just said, this is the new Marvel Universe. It begins with Fantastic Four, and as we go, we'll introduce new versions of old characters you've already seen and that sort of thing. Maybe. But I don't know, there was too much invested in on what they had done and all that. But interestingly enough, they're both kind of in the same position. Despite all the massive success Marvel had with DC stumbling with a few hits here and there, but mostly failing. But nevertheless, here they are. You know, the reasons are different between the two, uh, but here they are. Like, please, please come and see the film. And, you know, and Superman and Fantastic Four will go head to head in the movies. One wonders if they could finagle a deal, Superman versus Spider-Man on screen. Uh, but how do you legally finagle that? You know, but if they could, maybe they would, but I doubt it. But anyway, there you are, going to be new crossovers with only two books. So one called DC Marvel, the other called Marvel DC. There's something similar about that. But anyway, gee, I hope it won't be any confusion. And we'll see how they go. Boy, if it's a smash hit, I imagine they'd be inclined to do more of it. But nevertheless, it's just a stunt. And if they can craft and hire the best artists they can afford, which is increasingly more difficult for them. Gee, I wonder why. At least it could be that. Uh, and we'll see. But of course, if they're only going to use, you know, their wokeified versions of their heroes, this thing is dead on arrival. Now you got to use the classic characters teaming up in these little one shots. So look forward to that. Meanwhile, just over at DC, they had announced there were going to be relaunches of Batman and Superman. Now, with Detective Comics, they're going to be doing the sequel to Hush with Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee working on that. But the Batman title will be relaunched. And not a moment too soon because Chip Zdarsky really dropped the ball on that thing. I had to, once it got stupid after Failsafe and he went into a multiverse thing again and gets his hand chopped off. What I don't know. I quit. I dropped out. I even dropped out on the Batman and Robin series. That one wasn't too bad, but I don't know. There was a lot of comics piling up, and it just wasn't good enough to hold my interest. Though I hear it's still pretty good. But they got a new artist on it that just wasn't up to snuff, and I just like I'm sorry, I couldn't continue with it. So maybe it's doing all right now. I mean, I'll have to take a look at it again. But they'll probably reboot that as well, or maybe even end it. I don't know. But anyway, they're going to relaunch Batman in September and give him a new look and all this sort of stuff. Slightly new look, but anyway. For only the fourth time in DC history, the history of DC Comics, Batman will be having a brand new #1 this September, as the series will be relaunched following the conclusion. Oh, conclude! I thought this was going to be in Detective. Oh, I got that wrong. I'm sorry. All right. So the Hush sequel will begin with Jim Lee and Jeff Lowe. And then when that's concluded, it Batman starts over with a brand new #1 written by Matt Fraction, marking his first ongoing series for DC and just his second major work for DC, period, following his acclaimed Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen series with Steve Lieber back into it. Unaware of this. It will be drawn by current artists on Batman, Jorge Jimenez. So there it is, and they're going to add more emphasis on the blue for Batman, but they're changing up his logo. And here's some of the art that, or the art, the design work on what Jorge's doing for the character. And it's not bad. It's just I'm not sure about this. It's a little too much. But other than that, it's fine because it's basically the same bat suit you usually see, you know. Uh, so you know the belt, and it's a little more clunky, as you would expect. That business of when it was just these little pins on a yellow belt, and somehow it contained, I don't know, a full-on rifle in it or whatever. Yeah. Well, you know, it's compact. It's bigger on the inside. So anyway, a lot of the idea I always took was that the bat suit is black and gray, but when the light hits it, it has sheen of blue, and I think that's the better way to go rather than full on blue and gray. and looks to be kind of what they're doing with more of a pronounced blue tint on the underside of the cape. For a while, they did it where it was kind of like purple or something, you know. But anyway, it's pretty much basic Batman, uh, but just slight alterations, primarily the bat tail. Hmm. Hmm. So anyway, also in the press release, the great, yeah, he showed his artwork, all that, commented about his excitement regarding the new book. As an artist, I have to say this is something I've always dreamed of getting in to do it alongside someone as amazing and talented as Matt. So, yeah, they're gonna pump each other up and all that. But I thought I saw where the there will be an overall story arc, but they're going to try to keep it self-contained within individual issues, which is the way to go. These long, drawn out things, television does it. It's really killed the medium. And for comic books, doubly so, especially for these supposed to be these action adventure stories. So that's a bit of a tidbit that holds some amount of promise. On the other hand, though, it could all go to crap. You just don't know. But I will check it out and see how good it can be. And if it is, then I'll say so. You know, but the looks okay. That's okay. Okay. That's all you're gonna get. Doesn't blow up more than that, but that's great. Can't tell. So, anyways, but the art is fantastic, and there he is, Batman. And there he is again, being Batman, investigating a crime scene and all that. So basically, there would be whatever the crime is in this particular issue. Batman deals with it, probably solves it, but on the other hand, there's some things percolating in between and behind the scenes and that kind of thing. And that's fine. Comics have always done that. But where each issue is mostly conversations or whatnot, or Batman pouting and feeling sorry for himself and all that kind of stuff. And then maybe 30-ish, well, 30, they don't even make 30 anymore. 12 issues later, oh, it was the Joker all along, and then it ends. It's like, yeah, that doesn't work. So one can hope, but a lot of damage has been done to comics overall. It's probably too late. I just don't know. But if that's the case, just go for, the independents that I talked about. Miller and Ghost Machine are very good. And still with Marvel and DC, your best bet is the out of continuity stories. And I need to get back to Gotham by Gaslight. I need to make a priority on that. Titles like that. It doesn't really matter overall if you're publishing something that's interesting to read. I'll read it, and I'll even pay money to read it. And who cares if it's main continuity or not? It's the entertainment that matters. At least that's what I think. Anyway, thanks for joining me again for this Wednesday comics show. And hopefully I'll have something for you next Wednesday, and we'll do it again on next Wednesday. Imagine that. Wednesday comics on Wednesday. Yeah.